This morning we are reading Psalm 8. O Lord, our sovereign, how majestic is your name in all the earth. You have set your glory above the heavens. Out of the mouths of babes and infants, you have founded a bulwark because of your foes to silence the enemy and the avenger. When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars that you have established. What are human beings that you are mindful of them, mortals that you care for them? Yet you have made them a little lower than God and crowned them with glory and honor. You have given them dominion over the works of your hands. You have put all things under their feet, all sheep and oxen, and also the beasts of the field, the birds of the air, and the fish of the sea, whatever passes along the paths of the seas. O Lord, our sovereign, how majestic is your name in all the earth. Hear what the Spirit is saying to the church. Thanks be to God.
As Colleen knows, I had a hard time choosing a Bible passage for our worship today. That's not because so few scriptures talk about the earth, it's because so many do. I began the week by listening to an interview with Ellen Davis, who teaches Bible and theology at Duke Divinity School. She noted that you can't go more than a few chapters in the Old Testament without seeing some reference to the land, or to water and its health or lack of health, or to the absence or abundance of fertile soil. She said that the biblical writers were pervasively aware that God is the creator of everything that is. And throughout the Hebrew Bible, we see them exploring the complex relationships of humans with the earth and with the rest of God's creatures. I settled on Psalm 8 because I like the way that it blends themes that are also present in the creation stories of Genesis, namely, that human beings are made in the image of God. It's amazing, right? Yet at the same time, we are tiny, even insignificant beings in the vast theater of God's glorious creation. Let's consider the first thing first, that we are made in the image of God. And as is proclaimed in the Psalm, we are given dominion over the works of God's hands, the beasts of the field, the birds of the air, and the fish of the sea. Now, the word dominion makes me uncomfortable, if I'm honest. In English, the word dominion is related to the word dominate. And that's what we've done, often recklessly, even violently, as you and I confessed just a few minutes ago. But there's another reason to feel uncomfortable with the word dominion, and that is because of the responsibility inherent in it. Now, Davis says that the Hebrew word in the creation story is as loaded as the English word dominion. Her translation of the Hebrew is to exercise skilled mastery over something. Because we are made in the image of God and charged by God to exercise skilled mastery over the other things that God has made, there's a way that human beings are given the honor and responsibility of representing God's own benevolent dominion in the world. We are meant to stand up for God's interests in the world. And that's a big deal. It requires remembering how, before God made and blessed human beings, God made and blessed all the other creatures of the earth. God saw that they were beautiful. God declared them good. And God blessed the creatures of the sea and the sky with exactly the same blessing that human beings got, to be fruitful and to multiply. Whatever it means to exercise skilled mastery over these creatures, it cannot undo the blessing God gave to them. It's our responsibility, in fact, to preserve and protect the blessing God gave to other creatures. That's our vocation as creatures made in the image of God. Now, the second creation story in Genesis points to no less responsibility than the first. In it, human beings are formed from the fertile soil. God molds them and breathes life into them. And in this account, the vocation of humanity is to get our hands dirty. God sets people in the garden to work in it and to watch over it. And these are weighty words too. The Hebrew word for work is sometimes translated serve. And when it's directed toward God, it can mean worship. That's how human beings are meant to work the land, with reverence and the awareness that we are subject to the land. The word translated tend or watch is often used in relation to the Torah. We are meant to watch the land like we watch God's holy law. We're meant to keep it and make sure it isn't violated. So God charges the first human beings to cherish what they are essentially tied to. As Davis says, soil has a claim on us. It is more like a relative than a resource. Sister, Mother Earth, St. Francis would have said. The earth is to be respected, not used. Now, Ellen Davis says it is certain that the editors who fused these two creation accounts intended us to see them as complementary components of a single story. So people are connected on one side of our family with divinity, and on the other side of our family with the fertile soil. Keeping both stories in mind helps us to avoid getting a distorted opinion of ourselves. Human power, while grand, is meant to be exercised within limits. We are dust, and to dust we shall return. I find this powerful to think about in the days of COVID-19. We remember that we are dust-bound creatures. We are limited. We are mortal. And yet we are also privileged to extend the significance of our lives beyond the confines of our egos. How? We do that through the divine gift of community. We recall that other creatures were here before us and will be here after us. And we honor the dignity of all of life by limiting our consumption of God's gracious goods. Now, these days, we've been forced to limit our consumption, and we have seen how, as humanity has hunkered down in quarantine, the rest of creation has had room to flourish. As you and I and people all over the world have taken a step back, the rest of the natural world has taken a step forward. Black bears are roaming freely, grazing on the fresh spring grass in our national parks. The Himalayan mountains are visible from 125 miles away for the first time in 30 years. Canals in Venice are so clear you can see the fish and the jellyfish in them. It has become abundantly clear that on a regular day, you and I take up too much space, and we live in ways that harm the earth and her creatures. We consume more than we should. So here's some encouragement when we can get out again to do so with care. Let's remember how, when people limit our consumption, other creatures flourish as God intended. And the flourishing of other creatures has conveyed a blessing back to us, hasn't it? I've been in so many conversations over Zoom, of course, over the last several weeks. And when people speak about what they are grateful for these days, or what they're enjoying, or what is saving them even, they often mention something in the natural world. I follow an artist named Lori Hatteen on Instagram, and this week she said, "Wild places are full of magic. They shrink problems and grow gratitude." Based on what I've heard lately, it isn't just wild places that shrink problems and grow gratitude. It might be sitting in a backyard patio, or the fragrance of a flower in a pot, or the taste of a strawberry you pause to savor. Such things can shrink problems and grow gratitude. So let's use the chat box for a minute if you want to share. What is one natural, non-human thing that has put your problems into a helpful perspective and grown gratitude in you? And I invite you to be as specific as you can be. What is one natural, non-human thing that has brought you joy or peace or a moment of pleasure? The smell of lilacs. Azaleas blooming, birds feeding. You could hear the birds on in Colleen's field. Ducks and ducklings, owls, dogwoods, bulbs breaking through the ground, roses blooming, robin eggs, finches, honey, stars, fresh air, squirrels playing in the yard. A great blue heron stalking fish, sunlight. Ooh, giant earthworms. No, they're good. My neighbor rooster singing, bunnies, the sun's warmth. The promise of peonies blooming, sunrise. Yellow-bellied sapsuckers. I'm gonna have to look that up. And taking that one step farther, as you think about one thing that has grown gratitude in you, what else besides gratitude has that thing evoked in you? Like maybe the taste of the tomato reminded you of your grandfather who loved to grow tomatoes in his garden. Or maybe the warmth of the sunshine eased the tension from your shoulders. Maybe that glimpse of the moon and the stars stirred wonder in you about the complexity of the world. What gift has the natural world given you? Invitation to be still and breathe. Patience. Mystery. Seeing. Remembering death as part of the life cycle reminds us that we're not in control. Perspective and a sense of place. Remembering those I love and who love me. Peace, be still. Reminder of a wonderful childhood. Sympathy, mindfulness of the Spirit's presence. Reminder that we're small, just knowing a fraction of what God has created in the earth. Empathy. That rebirth comes in cycles. Sense of life. Steadiness of the seasons is anchoring. Kindles praise. Feeling of groundedness, something I was noting yesterday. I stumbled upon John Donahue's Blessing for One Who is Exhausted the other day. Let me read part of that to you. O'Donohue said, "When the rhythm of the heart becomes hectic, time takes on the strain until it breaks. Then all the unattended stress falls in on the mind like an endless increasing weight. The light in the mind becomes dim. Things you could take in your stride before now become laborsome events of will. Weariness invades your spirit. Gravity begins falling inside you, dragging down every bone. You have traveled too fast over false ground. Now your soul has come to take you back. Take refuge in your senses. Open up to all the small miracles you rushed through. Become inclined to watch the way of rain when it falls slow and free. Imitate the habit of twilight, taking time to open the well of color that fostered the brightness of day. Draw alongside the silence of stone until its calmness can claim you. When we attend to the natural world, all the small miracles of God's creation, we inherit more of the blessings God intended, not just for us, but for every living thing. And then, may we be moved to sing, like the psalmist, our own song of praise.